My neighbor, Karen, and her submissive husband, known as her slave, have made my life unbearable for years. My family and I have faced years of immigration and poverty, and Karen has exacerbated our situation by throwing bottles from her terrace at our car, damaging our treadmill, monopolizing our common spaces, and destroying our trash cans. The list of transgressions is extensive. Karen would draw up the plans and order her husband to carry them out. I finally decided to take revenge through a meticulously crafted plan to undermine her life to the point of losing it completely, including her home and custody of her son. Subscribe to my YouTube channel, press the bell to activate notifications, as I will share the details of this journey of revenge. I am an only child, born in the USA, to older parents who immigrated from Venezuela. My father was the victim of a shooting when I was 2 years old, leaving him a completely different person for the last 13 years of his life. Despite adversity, my mother became the family's main breadwinner, facing poverty due to the lack of recognition for her college degree in the US. At the age of 7, my parents decided to move to a city with better schools, purchasing a house on the outskirts. While we faced life's difficulties, the troubled neighbor, Karen, continued her hostile actions. My father passed away when I was 15, making our situation even worse. I grew up in a chaotic environment and, after overcoming mental health challenges, achieved academic achievements, attending college on scholarships. Now, as an adult, I have decided to no longer tolerate Karen's teasing. I started a plan to change the dynamic between us, actively participating in the management of the condominium. Simultaneously, I collected evidence of her transgressions over the years, documenting her harmful acts and questionable parenting practices. My revenge culminated in a plan to expose her, with significant consequences for her life. This is a moving narrative of overcoming and justice. Follow my journey of transformation, where adversity is converted into victory, proving that, even in the worst circumstances, it is possible to achieve justice and peace. He, an immigrant who does not speak English, shows extreme submissiveness to Karen, his wife. In front of other people, however, he seeks to appear physically dominant. In the first years here, we witnessed frequent fights between them, screams that echoed for hours and moments when violence seemed imminent. Their son Henry, born about 10 years ago, doesn't play a significant role in this story until later. Regardless of what Karen did, she always got away with it. My mother, proud of how she took care of her bins, washed them meticulously every month after collection day, avoiding unpleasant odors and the formation of bacteria. On the contrary, Karen did not show the same diligence. On one occasion, her trash can became disgustingly dirty, and instead of cleaning it, she left it out in the open. The context here is important as, behind the house, there is no yard, just a sidewalk with designated parking spaces for each unit. Given the situation, we started using our recycling bin, and maintenance hours quickly increased. We went from a quick monthly wash to a rigorous 45-minute clean with soap and water. Eventually, we decided to take action and sent Karen and the third-floor tenants at the time a polite but firm email. The email asked them to stop using our recycling bin, explaining that they had not asked for permission and that we took good care of it. Karen and Bill received a new recycling bin, but mysteriously ours was destroyed a week later, cut into pieces with a knife. Without concrete evidence, we need to acquire a new one. For years, we faced the lack of a car, using only our parking space in the back. At Karen and Bill's frequent parties, trash was thrown from the porch into the trash cans, located next to our parking space. Bottles thrown from the second floor resulted in dents in our old Toyota 88, and broken windows were repaired with each polite approach from my parents. Although they avoided confrontation, my parents never justified going beyond knocking on Karen's door and respectfully asking her to stop the hurtful acts. This is yet another example of Karen's absolutely terrible behavior, but it's also relevant to the revenge part of the story, so I'm including it after this section. Our basement is shared between the 3 units, each with its designated space, sort of office cubicles, and there is some designated common area. A few years ago, maybe 8 or 9, Karen and Bill completely filled their assigned cubicle in the basement, then began piling things all over the common area. Gradually, they formed a huge pile of trash in front of the units, including our unit, where the heating oil tank is located. My parents chose not to confront the situation, as this happened over an extended period of time, avoiding starting a fight. As far as I know, the residents on the 3rd floor have not expressed any objections either. However, the pile of trash grew to the point where it occupied a common area that was easily twice the size of the designated cubicle. I want to admit that for many years, my parents and I were not the best neighbors. We didn't intimidate anyone, but my father's condition made him susceptible to angry outbursts, creating a chaotic environment. I grew up in this environment, even witnessing the arrival of the police due to noise disturbances at home. However, we maintained discretion and were always polite and respectful to all neighbors. Of course, our priority was my father's stability, and we had enough to deal with. After my father's death, I faced my own mental health challenges, resulting from the chaotic and aggressive environment in which I grew up. I had depressive tendencies for years, but despite the struggles, I managed to graduate from high school after 8 years of study. Similar to the time when my father was sick, I became my mother's top priority. Karen and Bill, however, continued to get away with their inappropriate behavior. From high school to college, I obtained my bachelor's degree and am currently undertaking postgraduate studies towards my master's degree, largely funded by scholarships, a big highlight of the incredible book Confessions of a Scholarship Winner. I recently decided that as an adult now, and having a bit more say in household decisions, I was tired of watching Karen bully my parents, especially my mother, over the years. So, I started the revenge phase. One of my plans was to facilitate my involvement in the administrative dialogue of the adult condominium. I started helping more in the common parts of the house, renovating the floor on the back porch alone. While it may seem like more than it actually was, the removal and replacement of floorboards, I also replaced both storm doors, about 6 months apart, when each began to have distinct problems, regardless of type. I also dedicated myself to some comparatively minor tasks. I pulled weeds in the back for a few hours, mowed the lawn in the front on a few occasions, and woke up early to beat everyone else in snow removal, not in the winter of 18 to 19, but in the winter of 17 to 18. Also, I started returning everyone's trash cans after trash week, every week, not just ours. After carrying out these actions, I sent an email to everyone in the condominium informing them that this had been taken care of. I only asked that the other 2 units reimburse me for a third of the cost of materials, according to their schedule, since there was no advance notice. This was fair to allow them to pay when they could. Smaller actions no longer needed advertisements. The idea was that, over time, neighbors would see me taking more initiatives, which would justify my more active participation in condominium politics. I also took care to keep conversations in emails so that there was always a written record of each interaction. Phase 2 of my plan pretty much ran simultaneously with Phase 1, but it had a totally different purpose and was totally different overall. I started gathering evidence from everything I could. I asked my mother to track down all the old emails she and my father exchanged with neighbors, documenting many instances in which Karen and Bill had caused problems. Went down and took a video of their stuff throughout the common area, especially highlighting the flammable wooden and cardboard items stacked in front of our oil tank. I reviewed the rules around common areas and the limitations of our units compared to others, and vice versa. To my delight, my parents never threw away that old recycling bin that Karen and/or Bill had damaged. Apparently they never knew what to do with her and didn't want to answer questions. Naturally, I dug it up and took several photos, adding more evidence. Plus, Karen and Bill are horrible parents, and my mom and I regularly hear the things they do to Henry through the thin roof we have here. I won't go into details, because even changing his name, he's younger, and it would be disrespectful. I grew up in a bad situation, so I can guarantee that this part is the most satisfying of my revenge. Every time I heard something through the ceiling, I would pull out my phone and start recording. Finally, Phase 3 of my plan was to lure Karen and/or Bill into a trap I had set that would ultimately have huge consequences for them. My mom and I had an old treadmill that we got for free. It was in the kitchen, and we recently concluded that it took up too much space. We both used it a little, but not enough to justify keeping it. My mother wanted to throw it away, but I argued vigorously to keep it around. Because I knew I could use it for this plan, it would be my only opportunity. Remember how I mentioned that we haven't had a car in years? Well, eventually I convinced my mom to allow me to put the treadmill outside in our back parking space. I bought a large tarp to cover her, protecting her from the rain, and I told her that I would start using it more if I went outdoors, as it is more pleasant to exercise outdoors. I sent an email to Karen, CC to Bill and the current third floor staff, asking them to move all the stuff in front of our oil tank in the basement to another location, even though that stuff had been there for many years. I justified addressing the issue now, as I am the one dealing with this, and this is different from before, as I am now an adult actively involved in inter-condo dialogue. I asked her because the way it's currently set up poses a security risk, and I'm just following the rules. She and Bill declined to take care of it, and I informed everyone that within a few weeks I would have no choice but to take care of it myself. In the same email, I placed the treadmill in our back parking spot and advised that if anyone had trouble getting it into their spot, please let me know the same day I sent the email. I placed the mat there, imagining that nothing would change, as with all the other emails I received since then about issues related to the condominiums. Nothing happened, and Karen and Bill never acknowledged anything. The residents on the third floor did not want to be involved in the confrontation with Karen, so they just thanked me for the warning about the treadmill and didn't say anything else. It's important to note that my real reason for mentioning the treadmill in that email was not in case someone had trouble getting into their parking space. A treadmill in the kitchen is a big, unsightly thing, but next to a car parking space, it's not big at all. I placed it so that it wouldn't get in anyone's way, giving everyone ample room to maneuver. The reason I mentioned the treadmill was to alert her to its presence and associate it, perhaps, with my request that she take her things to the basement. Their time was up. One night, around 1 a.m., when everyone was asleep and no one could hear me, I went downstairs to move their things. I can't explain how much I enjoyed this. I bought a GoPro, strapped it to his head, and carefully recorded all the movement of his things. I picked up the huge pile of junk in front of my mom's oil tank and found a way to put it all in its designated storage cubby. In the end, it was full, and I almost exploded at how well organized everything was, a masterpiece from floor to ceiling, almost wall to wall, forming a huge rectangular prism of junk, almost perfect. I was immensely pleased with the outcome of the basement. There was plenty of room to walk up to any wall, but impossible to get in anywhere. I returned to our apartment and couldn't sleep for the rest of the night as I was incredibly excited. I ended up watching Infinity War to prepare for Ant-Man and the Wasps and the next releases. Sure enough, Karen and Bill fell into the trap. I must have been at school or work when they discovered the basement because I never heard anything about it. In retrospect, it was probably better that I had been absent, although I savored those angry screams like never before. Within a few days, we discovered our treadmill destroyed in a similar manner to the trash can from years past. She was stabbed. I imagine they probably wanted to give it a hammer, but didn't want to make too much noise, so they ended up destroying the thing with a really big, sharp knife. It was our only property they had access to at that time, other than our dumpsters and dumpsters. Several years ago, I filled in the rest of our basement cubicle wall and installed a lockable door. Our cubicle is now closed to everyone else, but the others are open, and anyone can enter. Plus, I can imagine that destroying a $1,000 treadmill is infinitely more tempting than trash or a recycling bin. So they did it in retaliation for my basement stunts. After moving their stuff in the basement, I started timing my used treadmill differently so I wouldn't run into them when I used it. When I saw it destroyed, I went straight to the camera I had placed in the pantry. She captured it all in true style of their relationship. Bill brandished a huge knife and single-handedly destroyed everything, while she stood next to him, apparently ordering him to do it, pointing to all the parts she wanted him to cut off. I called the police, reported the incident, and said that my mother and I felt threatened by them. We filed a restraining order against Karen and Bill the same day I turned over all the evidence I had gathered over the years, including audio clips of Karen and Bill terrorizing Henry. Even though it was just audio and not video, I thought I could at least get the Department of Children and Families involved in the situation. Karen and Bill immediately claimed that I had broken several of their things while moving in the basement, things that they had no doubt broken themselves. I offered my GoPro recordings as proof that I hadn't broken anything while moving their stuff. The restraining order, initially temporary, was extended by the court. Karen and Bill weren't legally allowed to return home for about a week, and since it became a long-term restraining order, they basically wouldn't be allowed to live in their own homes for several years. So they made the obvious decision to sell the house and move somewhere else. Selling a house, as you might expect, is not an easy task, especially when you are not allowed to be nearby. Removing all your things from the house becomes even more challenging. They coordinated the entire sale of the house remotely, with the real estate agent being the only person present when it was time for them to move. Some relatives showed up to pack and load everything into a truck. As I predicted, based solely on my recordings, Henry was not removed from custody, but the DFC became involved. I heard from their family that they came to organize his things, even though Karen and Bill lost custody of him. They didn't provide many details about why, but they implied that Henry's terror had increased considerably after everything that had happened between me, Karen, and Bill. That's the only part one feels guilty about, but I hope the end justifies the means. At this point, the DFC was already investigating, so they ended up losing custody of him anyway. I have no idea where Henry ended up, but wherever he is, I have nothing against him and I hope he's in a much better place than he was before. Finally, I must say that despite Karen and Bill being such extraordinarily obtuse and disgusting human beings, they had surprisingly decent family members the few times I met them. They apologized several times for all of this, and I got the impression it wasn't the first time they'd apologized on Karen and Bill's behalf. I hope Henry is taken in by one of them and not put into foster's system. If we skip to the future, there is a significant update. Karen has lost her job, or at least she is no longer working where she used to. I assume she was fired or released due to something related to what happened, but I can't be sure. I was curious after posting this and remembered that she worked as a guidance counselor at a school a few towns away. I wonder if the school found out that DFC took custody of her, maybe they wouldn't want her there anymore. To clarify, I asked a friend to call the school secretary and get transferred to the guidance department, where Karen had her desk. The secretary reported that a staff member was no longer employed there and that they replaced her at the beginning of this school year. I can't say whether she was fired or whether her departure had anything to do with me and my revenge. However, the timing seems quite peculiar if there is no correlation. In this case, I was the fool for accessing the links I used to make Karen lose her home. This is one of those extraordinarily unusual revenge plans because of how meticulous and precise the planning was. The author pretty much considered every possible eventuality and created contingency plans for each one, like the GoPro strapped to the operator's head, anticipating claims that the operator broke his stuff during the move. And this was cleverly prevented in advance by having the GoPro setup ready to go. There are even some humorous elements of a type of thought worthy of the film Inception, where in the email the operator tries to associate the treadmill with the excess of things in the basement. I hope this association happens, and it did, because when they were furious about moving their things, they looked at the end of the email and guessed that my treadmill was in the parking space. They simply didn't realize they were falling into a trap, as the entire situation was recorded. If you look at this from a bird's-eye perspective, it may seem simple, but you have to remember all the clever details that led to this result. The only thing that bothers me is the whole situation with their son, Henry. I know it's been a while since all of this happened, but I hope Opie's actions put Henry in a less dangerous position than the one he was in with Karen and Bill, because no one should have to grow up like that. Now, I want to know your opinion on all this revenge. Do you think it went too far, or do you think it was a justified action? Was I a fool, or did I do what was right, and why? When subscribing, don't forget to click the bell to activate notifications and follow all the stories in this series. Use the playlist at the top of the description to hear all the stories. Today, we explore an epic story of revenge on our beloved Reddit. Opie, the master strategist, has devised a meticulous plan to get back at his troubled neighbors, Karen and Bill. With the help of a GoPro and a series of calculated moves, Opie managed to expose the couple's nefarious actions. But the twist doesn't stop there. Opie's revenge had unexpected consequences for Karen and Bill, including Karen losing her job. Additionally, their son Henry can now be in a safer environment. What do you think of this incredible story? Was it justified revenge or did it go too far? Leave your opinion in the comments. And of course, if you enjoyed this epic narrative, don't forget to subscribe, leave a like and activate the notification bell so you don't miss any chapter of our stories on HistoReddit. Also visit the playlist at the top of the description to check out more exciting content. Until next time, everyone.